Welcome back to CEEN Caribbean News. It's now time to go in depth. Less than 2 months after general elections in Trinidad and Tobago, delegates of the opposition United National Congress are preparing to once again head to the polls, this time to elect a new leader. The UNC elections will be held on December 5. Former Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissesa is being challenged by her former opposition chief whip, Dr. Rudal Munilal, for the party's top spot. But following the defeat in the general elections and the events that contributed to that loss, are either individuals the right person to charge the UNC forward? We explore that and related issues right now with political pundit and attorney-at-law Martin Daly. Welcome to Indepth, Mr. Daly. Now, with all that happened on the campaign trail leading up to general elections on September 7 and the accusations that have been attached to Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissesa, does she have a good chance of retaining office?
I don't know, because under normal circumstances, you would expect that she would lose her attempt to be re-elected. But there are some questions surrounding the people who are going up against her, not only as political leader, but on the slate that is opposed to her. So I think it's too early to tell one way or the other what will happen.
Someone who was a frontrunner in Mrs. Persad-Bissesa's camp, Dr. Rudal Munilal, decided to challenge her for the party's leadership. Would this development weaken her chances for office in any way?
Well, I think he's a strong, for want of a better word, grassroots contender, meaning he will definitely have strong support within the grassroots. But there are some aspects about his political bedside manners that are negative and may cause people to pause before they vote him in. It's really too early to tell. But he does carry some baggage of his own.
Dr. Munilal is the first person to pose a challenge to the incumbent party leader for her office. At this time, has anyone else thrown a hat into the ring?
No, no one else has. There was some talk that Vasan Bharat, who is also a minister in the outgoing government, would do so. But that does not seem likely at this point. It seems as though it is likely to be a two-person contest between Mrs. Persad-Bissesa and Dr. Munilal. There was talk of Vasan Bharat, but that seems to have faded. And most of the other heavyweights who are likely to be opposed to her are putting up on Munilal's slate for other positions, such as chairman of the party.
Now, though you've mentioned earlier that it's too early to tell much of the pending December 5 elections, you also mentioned that grassroots supporters are more likely to be in favor of Dr. Munilal. From which sector of the society are you foreseeing Mrs. Persad-Bissesa getting the bulk of her support?
Well, I think both of them have grassroots support, and so it's hard to tell who will get the bigger support from the grassroots. It's really very difficult to tell. I'm not suggesting that she doesn't have grassroots support. I just think it's too early to tell. It may divide along class lines, for example. Maybe some of the better-heeled persons among the grassroots of the party. By grassroots of the party, I mean loyal supporters. It may divide itself along class lines, but I do maintain my position. It's too early to tell.
Now, Jack Warner has cemented himself as a thorn in the UNC's side, and the mud he smeared the party with may linger towards the internal elections in December. Now, considering all his accusations and antics, are voters excited about the impending elections?
I don't think there's much excitement outside the confines or the four walls of the UNC. I think people who are not strong UNC supporters see it as an internecine struggle. I don't think there's much excitement about it outside of that. It's almost like, I think for many people who are not within the confines of UNC, it's like watching a blood sport.
Of Mrs. Bissesa and Dr. Munilal, who do you think should be better suited to lead the party at this time?
I think they need to look elsewhere for new blood. I'm not satisfied. If I had to choose between either of them, I am not satisfied that either of them would fit my bill for a new leader, given the baggage that they both carry. That's going to be a problem for people within the UNC to make up their minds, given the baggage, and particularly if it turns nasty and personal and they start, so to speak, letting out secrets about each other. That's why it's so early to tell. we don't know if it's going to be a clean campaign or if it's going to be a personally destructive campaign. I would have been much more enthusiastic if Michaela Pandey, Mr. Pandey's daughter, was a candidate for political leader, a younger person who doesn't carry baggage or much baggage.
What if Vasant Barath decides to offer a challenge? Do you think he'd make a fitting leader of the UNC?
Well, he has some baggage too, but he does have a very long pedigree of association with the UNC and the predecessor parties through his father, who was a long service and distinguished parliamentarian, and I think that would certainly carry a certain amount of weight. His political lineage is very good, and he's perhaps a little less rough around the edges.
Now, you expressed confidence of success if Michaela Pandey had put a bid in the race for the UNC leadership. Are you seeing anyone else, especially a fresh face, who would be able to effectively challenge Mrs. Bisesa?
No, other than some of the other heavyweights who, as I say, have either stayed neutral or gone over onto Dr. Munilal's slate. There's a split among the members of the 18 members of parliament as well, and I would say the lighter weights are probably with Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, with one outstanding exception, which is Dr. Rambachan, and the heavier weights seem to be going towards Dr. Munilal, but we don't know what effect that will have on the ordinary member of UNC. And there's also the very perplexing problem that Mr. Pandey and others are questioning the integrity of the voting process, so that makes it even more confusing. Dr. Munilal has had his lawyer write letters to the General Secretary of the party, complaining that he's not being allowed to see the voters list and so on. Another element of uncertainty.
Are you surprised at Dr. Munilal's decision to challenge Kamla Prasad Bisesa?
Does not surprise me at all. I see him as a relatively young Turk, an ambitious person. He has a lot of strong points politically. So it does not surprise me at all. And at one time, Mr. Pandey liked him a lot, and then at one time, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa was supposedly anointing him as a successor. So it's not surprising at all.
Now, does the potential change in the leadership of the UNC pose an obstacle to the election petition challenging the general election results, which is now before the courts?
I doubt it, because they would regard themselves as having a sporting chance. There is talk on the ground that the election petition challenges were really Mrs. Bisesa's idea. But I would be surprised if they didn't. Why not? What harm does it do? I mean, they might suffer an order for costs if they're unsuccessful. Well, what harm does it do to have that as a second string to your bow, even if there's a change of leadership? So I'd be surprised if they abandoned it.
Thank you very much for speaking with us, Mr. Daly. We were just joined by political analyst and attorney at law, Mr. Martin Daly, discussing the internal elections of the United National Congress in Trinidad and Tobago, which will be held on December 5 this year.